So here are 5 things that I believe are very powerful in increasing the well-being of autistic people and allowing us to experience what you might describe as autistic joy, which is a very particular type of happiness and contentment that is sort of specific to being autistic, as you will see when I start going through them. So these are 5 things. They're not exhaustive. There are other things too. These are simply my 5. Please feel free to add to them should you wish. So number 1, I've put stimming. Okay, the physical act or audible act of making noises or moving in a certain way, usually repetitively. Now, often it is used to regulate stress. Yes, that is true. But in itself, that is there's an element of positivity in that. But we mustn't forget the true positivity of joyful stimming. The happy dance, the flappy hands when autistic people get excited or are really looking forward to something, or when something good happens. That way of showing enjoyment and getting some of that very positive energy out of your system and into the world, I think is a tremendous thing. And I often wonder if stimming was more socially acceptable, if actually positive stimming like this, joyful stimming, would actually be quite catching. Like a yawn is, or like laughter is. I wonder if stimming was more accepted by everyone, whether it actually might become a bit like that and contagious. Where if one person starts stimming happily because something's brilliant, then other people might start doing it too. I don't know. We're not in that state as a society yet, but maybe. Number 2, I've got special interests or spins or hyperfocuses or hyperfixations or whatever you want to call them. These are an autistic person's favourite topics, the things that they like to spend time with, the things that they like to enjoy. They're often kind of put together with hobbies, and in many ways they are very similar to hobbies, and they are hobbies, really, but there is an extra layer to them in terms of just how much good they do to the autistic person, how much regulation they bring, how much joy they bring. There are few things happier in the world, in my experience, than an autistic person who is safe and happy to just spend an afternoon enjoying one of their interests. It's a really powerful thing. One thing about children is autistic children, they are often encouraged out of their special interests. You must look at something else. You must try and expand your horizons, or, for goodness sake, stop talking about that again. And I would invite you to be careful about that, because these interests that they have, they may very well be lifelong. I still have many of the same interests that I had when I was 10 or 11 years old. I'm surrounded by Lego in here, for example. That's never gone away. That's always been there for me. And if I'd been told at an earlier age to stop liking Lego because it was childish or immature, that probably would have damaged me, to be quite honest with you, considering the amount of joy it brings to me, even now in my 40s. So it's enormously powerful, but treat them carefully. Treat them with respect, these interests. Number 3, I've put something that's often overlooked, which is sensory joy. We spend a lot of time in the autistic community and outside of the autistic community talking about sensory overwhelm, how easy and possible it is for autistic people to get bogged down and overwhelmed by their sensory surroundings. Too much light, too much noise, too many smells, whatever, temperature, clothing, all that sort of thing. We talk about that an awful lot. But the thing is, if you are very sensitive to a sensory stimulus, then it stands to reason that this can go both ways. Yes, it can be bad, it can be overwhelming and unpleasant, but equally, it can also be good and positive. If you imagine somebody who's hypersensitive to touch, who if you even just, poke them or prod them, they go, leave me alone. Well, maybe in certain circumstances, if they have one of those lovely head tools, with the fingers that kind of do this on your head, that might make them happier than anything, because it's a sensation that they've chosen. Similarly, with someone like myself who is very sensitive to sound, I actually like listening to music very, very loudly. And that confuses people, and I don't think it should, because these are sounds that I've chosen, that I like, and the fact that I'm sensitive to sound means that I hear them more vividly than I might otherwise. Hence why I love music so much, because my audio sensitivity works both ways. Okay, so allowing your autistic children or your friends or your colleagues or your family members to experience sensory joy is really important. Find out what makes them tick. Find out what helps them. Find out what makes them happy. Okay? Number 4 is mindfulness. Now, this is it's not controversial, but it's a little bit off the beaten path, this one, because it's not specific to autism. I mean, everyone could potentially benefit from mindfulness. But I speak here as somebody who's both autistic and ADHD. And I can promise you that because of that added spice of ADHD going on there, taking some time out to be mindful and to ground myself in my surroundings and to take in the sights and the smells, just on a walk through town or a walk in the countryside is hugely important. And it brings up so much sensory joy, and it brings up so many opportunities of what, improving your well-being, of improving your mental health. So I always say to neurodivergent people that I meet, autistic, ADHD or otherwise, is mindfulness something that you practice or try out or give a go to? Because I always recommend it, and it's simply a case of trying to take a little bit of time out during your day, stop overthinking everything, stop your brain whirring as best as you can, and focus on something in the here and now. My most mindful moments in any given day is standing at the sink in my kitchen, peering out the window at the garden, which isn't a very big or, awesome garden by any stretch, but just looking at the trees, looking at the bushes, and occasionally the little birds that come along to get some food. And I just feel myself becoming grounded, and the stress sort of washes away, at least for a time. It doesn't last forever, but it does help. And then finally, number 5, and this is something that I often talk about when the topic of diagnosis comes up. Why do we bother getting diagnosed, etc.? And it is self-compassion. Being kind to yourself, essentially. Many autistic people, especially those who are late diagnosed or not yet diagnosed, whatever their age might be, can suffer terribly from self-hatred, not liking or treating oneself very well, usually born of frustration or anger. Why can't I do this stuff? Why am I so different? I don't understand. Why can my friends do this and I can't? Why am I always getting into trouble for everything all the time? If you spend any amount of time reading about what it's like to actually be autistic, you will find out very quickly about how stressful it is, how much criticism we receive, how difficult it can be just to get through a day. So it stands to reason, if there's no explanation for any of this, your likelihood of really disliking yourself climbs exponentially. So my final point here is to invite autistic individuals and those around them can help with this, to care for themselves, to be compassionate towards themselves, to recognize the things that they can do and maybe the things that they struggle with, and to maybe just, reduce a little bit your expectations of yourself sometimes, not always, but sometimes. Do you really need to go and do that thing right now, or can you take a few moments just to decompress and relax and calm? It's vitally important, and it saved my life after I was diagnosed. I was 34 years old or something like that, because up to that point, I really did not like myself at all. I was so frustrated with myself, and then all of a sudden I find out, oh, that's why. And then my ADHD diagnosis a few years later helped complete the picture even more. So now I can be far nicer to myself, far more reasonable in my expectations of myself. And that's hugely beneficial to my well-being, and also unlocks more opportunities for autistic joy. If I'm not feeling that stress, I might then be able to really enjoy, the smell of lavender, or the sight of birds in the garden, or whatever. So there we are, 5 things that I think are really important sources of autistic joy, really important sources of autistic well-being.